The problems facing New Zealand's primary sector have been mounting at a rapid pace. So I think it's time for open hearts and open minds.
Welcome to Sarah's Country. Wherever in this world you are choosing to listen to, either on podcast or watching live across the web, as we endeavour to bring you the latest matters that matter most to New Zealand's food and fibre producers. Whether it's what is happening with the trading of our fine products around the world, or the expectations to be better, either through science or from our consumers' demands on our farmers and our growers. I'm your host, Sarah Perriam, and it's a privilege to bring you the latest from the great team at Farmers Weekly. Of course, bringing you the stories the talented team of agricultural journalists and analysts cover each day for not only the weekly newspaper, but daily on farmersweekly.co.nz. Of course, the Daily Digest is well subscribed to now. If you haven't, make sure you check it out. And of course, you'll see those headlines scrolling along the bottom of your screen. New Zealand is being regarded as one of the best places to be in the world right now. Absolutely understand that. The Sands are discussing hosting World Rugby here due to our wonderful COVID status. Billionaires have been making bunkers in Queenstown for years, and James Cameron's Avatar movie has been given a hall pass to come in. But what trumps me is what we can't work out a way to bring in our real money earners, our migrant tractor drivers, shearers, dairy workers, fruit pickers, healthcare workers, or international students. Now, I get it, it's easier for a rugby team to be managed in isolation, and the influx of thousands that we need to find where they would quarantine. But it's the real job that needs to be done. So I'm wondering how we can get more creative to get around this massive issue, because seriously, the consequences are very, very massive. If we don't get these experienced shearers, the animal welfare issues are starting to mount around lambing. And of course, our valued migrants with calving. The same no Irish to drive tractors flows through into that silage season. And I worry about the unhealthy hours our stretched Kiwis will be working. The rest of the world chooses to manage and live with diseases like M. bovis and COVID. I'd love to know your thoughts. To what detriment do we deny our essential workforce to come into this country, but we allow rugby players and film crews? I am really torn on this one, and I don't have an opinion. I'd actually love to hear from you in the comments below on what do you think that we should be doing and thinking and planning for into the future, wherever you're watching or listening to us live. I hope you're keeping warm and dry wherever you are across the country. I hear there's a lot of wet weather across the north and some gnarly sub-zero frosts in the south, of course, with that ice on the roads. The stresses of farming are a worry as we head into calving and lambing under pressure. And so much so that, you pair that with wet weather conditions. It's so important right now to tap on the shoulder of those of you around you to remind them to use their think safe brains. Because you know what I've noticed in the past couple of years, we are getting better at this, and we need to have the best peer pressure around this. The amount of farmers that are actually taking holidays when it's school holidays is actually really amazing, I've noticed. It's no longer a pissing contest about how many hours you've worked or how hard you've worked. I know now it's actually frowned upon a lot in rural communities, that if you're not looking after yourself. So if something happens to you or the people around you, imagine the effect it has on a wider group of people. So please, can you just take that message, especially with this wet weather and the stresses mounting in the farming community, to look after each other and, of course, yourself. The reason I'm saying this is I'm really looking forward to the absolute character that we have at the end of the show. For those of you who do know who I'm talking about, you agree with me. Chris Biddle, he has assured me he's not going to swear tonight on the program, from Te Atarangi Angus in Northland. The reason Chris is joining us is not, of course, how great his bull sale was, but of course to share his near-death experience on farm last year. And he has become a massively strong advocate of how detrimental stress can be after 740. I'd love to know, what do you do to calm the farm, chill out? And what do you do to encourage your partner, your spouse, your children, or team members, to avoid burnout? It sucks. I've been there, I know. I'd love to know, because stress kills more people indirectly through accidents and cancer than we think. So it's time to take this seriously, New Zealand. There's no free pass either for market gardens. Now, even with the exemption from the national freshwater rules from Parker, with the limits around nitrogen loss, between a rock and a hard place is Woodhaven Gardens owner Emma Clarke, who is also a Manawatu-Whanganui regional councillor, and she's going to share her views around this horror whenua being exempt after 720. After 7:30, the bull sales season was comparable to previous years despite COVID, and commercial buyers were pleased to still find suitable purchasing amid some of those record-breaking prices. My apologies. Carrfields Livestock agent and auctioneer and another character, Neville Clark, is going to join us for his take on the season. But first up tonight, New Zealand's wine export market has been hit hard by those on-premise sales struggling with shut restaurants and bars in the US. However, today, Delegates' profits were up 37%. Trying to work out what's going on, so I decided to ask for a market update from no other than the New Zealand Wine Growers CEO, Philip Gregan. And while we've got him, we'll see if we can sneak in around how vineyards are going, of course, with their skill shortages. All that up next on Sarah's Country. This is Sarah's Country.
Growing a better world takes courage. It takes foresight and vision. It's about dreaming big, then being brave enough to follow that dream through. To create a world where food is plentiful, soils are healthy, and rivers run crystal clear. A world where we grow more with less, where livestock is tended to with care. Energy is friend, not foe, and waste is a valuable resource. This is the world you're already shaping through imagination, innovation, and determination. So as small steps become huge leaps, you move boldly forward. And Rabobank is there beside you to help grow a better world together.
Now, COVID-19 has created massive disruption, no doubt, across all sectors of the world. But again, another one to fall victim is our US wine industry, that is New Zealand's largest wine export market, resulting in lower total sales and significant revenue losses for some US wineries. And of course, we want to find out from this report from Rabobank how much that's affecting here at home when we're hearing about some really high profit levels, especially off the back of Delegates. So joining us now is New Zealand Wine Growers CEO Philip Gregan. Good evening, Philip.
Good evening.
What is going on? Is it a bit of a mixed bag? And of course, this is all tied to the shut of on-premise sales.
Yeah, look, there's about 2 or 3 or 4 stories all going on at the same time. The close down in the hospitality trade obviously has had a big impact. The surge in online sales has compensated for that, and also the big supermarkets and big retailers have benefited as well. And what that means for New Zealand businesses is that those companies who have a strong presence in retail, they've done very well. Those ones who have had a bigger focus on premise, so in restaurants, they are really struggling. But the net effect across New Zealand wine at the moment is we believe that sales are up, and that's certainly what the data is saying.
Okay, so net-wise, we're still looking positive.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. But that, each company is experiencing this in a different way, and some of them are going very well, and others of them, they're really going to be struggling.
And how encouraging to have a couple of our fantastic wineries, Craigie Range and Ripon, I believe it, make this incredible list among the world's top 20 vineyards.
It's a fantastic story, isn't it? And anybody who's been to Ripon and seen the view, or been to Craigie and experienced that what they offer there, they are just indicative of the fantastic wineries that we have in New Zealand. And I was in correspondence with my Australian colleagues today, and they were noting that New Zealand did better on that list than the Australians, which always makes us feel good.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Especially with the news of apparently New Zealand's envious of Australia. With that, no.
In wine at the moment, I think they might be envious of us.
Yes, yes. How is your cellar doors experiencing domestic tourism? I know I've done my bit so far and continue to do.
Well, look, I think that's the point. Lots of Kiwis are getting out there, and the cellar doors that are open, especially during the school holidays at the moment, appear to be doing quite well. So that's incredibly encouraging. I was in Marlborough last week and was at a vineyard for lunch, and that restaurant was full, which is really good news. So we've really just got to encourage Kiwis to keep on going out there, visiting their wineries, consuming local, or consuming in other regions when they get the chance to travel within New Zealand.
It's very encouraging because every single one of those Kiwis are becoming ambassadors when they go back overseas, or of course have visitors here. So it's a fantastic time to reconnect, isn't it? The finest wine producing country that we are. Hey, just going back to that trade situation in the US. US is the largest exporter for New Zealand. How are we going in other markets, and in particular the changing palate of the Chinese?
Well, look, in our second biggest markets, the UK, we're seeing a very similar sort of trend to that in the United States. Our number 3 markets, Australia, again, a similar trend, and they've had the rebound in cases in Australia in the last few days, and clearly that's going to complicate things a lot. China for us is not a huge market for our wine, but I think we're seeing the same sort of trends there again. There is big questions about how long it's going to take for the on-premise for restaurants to rebound, and the slight surge they had in Beijing a few weeks ago. They're all creating uncertainty for consumers as well as the trade.
And so with a really bumper harvest that we've had this year, so there's going to be no issue, do you think, in terms of processing through that throughput?
Look, everything we've seen at the moment, and this is, but there's all this uncertainty, of course. Everything we're seeing at the moment says the big picture around New Zealand wine remains very positive in our key markets. The challenge is for those wineries who have been selling into on-premise or whatever, and really getting consumers to engage, for them in on-premise. Hopefully when the cellar door, when the border opens again at some stage of the next 12 to 18 months, when those foreign tourists start coming back into New Zealand.
And I mentioned there in the introduction, we've obviously had across all sectors of the primary sector such a skill shortage, and of course viticulture has obviously not got away with it either, especially going into the harvest season. But now we're getting into pruning. How are they getting on with finding staff and redeploying the unemployed, etc.?
Look, we think pruning appears to be going well. We've had generally favourable weather. We're able to start early because we had an early season this year, and so in some regions they got underway with pruning about a month earlier. So we think we're okay at the moment. Our big concern now is what's going to happen over spring and summer. We have a lot of specialist workers come into their country for vintage. There aren't going to be the backpackers around that we've seen in past years. So we are worried, like every other sector, about what the labour availability is going to be over the next 6 to 12 months. It's certainly one of the number one concerns.
So just another industry to get in line. Philip, if I could just use this opportunity, I'd really like to ask you, because I know many parts of the primary sector hold your part of the sector in such high regard. The primary sector council visions of Te Taiao have been released in recent weeks, and everybody's being reasonably complimentary. I spoke to a gentleman who I won't name, but you'll know well, here at Lincoln University, who's highly involved in accreditation programs. He told me that the Sustainable Wine Growing Accreditation is the best that we have in this country, and has achieved greatness, and we should all look to that. What would be your message to all parts of the primary industry in terms of coming together around a vision and accreditation in your learnings?
Look, I think the Prime Minister at the launch last week said something really interesting, and that was that these documents, the Fit for the Better World, Te Taiao, etc., to a larger extent, they're already reflecting what is happening in the various sectors. And, in our sector, I know with sustainable wine growing, but other sectors are doing these things as well. And I think it is about extending what we're doing. There will be some new stuff that we have to do. But I think these documents really reflect the huge strides that are being made on farm, on vineyard, on orchard, etc. So I don't think if these documents had been launched 20 years ago, it would be a completely different matter. But they really are a reflection of the enormous energy that's out there amongst all farmers, amongst all vineyard owners, to really look after the land, because that's their number one asset. And it makes a huge amount of logic and good commercial sense to do that well. And I just think, there's a lot of positives in there.
What a great comment and reflection on that. Thank you so much, Philip. Bringing us together and tying it around what we're already doing. What a great message. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Philip Gregan is the CEO for New Zealand Wine Growers. Now, I've got a couple of great viewer comments coming in. You guys are great. Thank you so much. Sandra Campbell, adequate staffing levels. We set the scene as soon as possible with new team members that we work smarter, not harder. No running around in a flap, as that's when accidents happen. Now, Anthony's made a really good point here. It's crazy that come summertime here in New Zealand primary sector is put under major pressure. He was talking to a local woman who runs one of the biggest contracting companies down in the deep south, and she is worried come the main harvest time and when the grass comes on that there will be no one available to do the specialist jobs that are filled by guys who come in from all around the world to spend their time here down under working. So, yeah, we are reflecting what is happening around the country. Thank you. Keep sending in those comments. What are your thoughts on how we can navigate getting in our essential workers and, of course, dealing with our opinion on what we should be doing about COVID, as well as, of course, ways to keep each other safe. It's a really important time to be thinking about that, where it's getting wet and slippery. Now, next on Sarah's Country, we are going to the Manawatu-Whanganui region to talk to not only a councillor, but of course also a market gardener on her conflicting opinions around Horowhenua being left out or made exempt by Minister David Parker with freshwater policy. Very interesting, and I'd like you to take the time to join us for this next interview. I'm very much looking forward to speaking to Emma Clarke up next on Sarah's Country. This is Sarah's Country.
Every morning, Kiwi farmers wake up to produce higher quality food. Yet, every night, some Kiwi families are going to sleep hungry. Meet the Need is a charity founded by farmers, and it's here to change all that. We're about New Zealand farmers feeding New Zealand families by donating a small part of what we grow when we can. You can help us make sure no one in New Zealand goes to sleep hungry again. Visit meettheneed.org and follow us on social.
One of the first things you learn when you live out here
is where to shop for the things you need to live out here.
like electric fencing,
or horse feed,
or bee suits.
children,
chook food.
Do you want a couple of these?
Or something stylish to wear. Not everyone's got stuff like this.
But at Farmlands we do, and then some.
So if you need anything to help you farm,
grow, milk, dredge,
rear, come on in.
Because we're out here too.
Really pleased we got into this. Thanks for your help, Dave.
It's a good idea, honey.
Do you reckon it'll come out? Cover it and tell compound to leave it 10 minutes. You'll be fine. Good call, Dave.
Good call on getting those security cameras, Dave.
You call a new one yet?
Yeah, kind of.
When you've got decisions to make, we'll be there to help you make the right call.
I'd go for those ones, Bob. Yeah, good call.
Did you choose these?
Oh, you know.
For great advice and insurance, talk to FMG.
Now, the government officials have recommended that Horowhenua and Pukekohe be treated separately from the latest national freshwater rules when limits on nitrogen toxicity are set. Horowhenua market gardener and Manawatu-Whanganui regional councillor Emma Clarke is adamant any removal of the district from government nitrogen rules is a far from a get out of jail free card for growers, and she joins us now on the phone. Good evening, Emma.
Good evening.
Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Now, Richard Rennie has written a great piece here on farmersweekly.co.nz around this. And it's a situation I'm following with great interest around Minister Parker suggesting that the current regional rules don't go far enough, yet at the same time national rules should come in and give exemption. Would you be able to set the scene for our audience and our viewers around the situation, what you've been lobbying to Regional Council for? You are a councillor as well as a market gardener, and then when you lay over top this national freshwater rules exempting market gardens, what's going on?
Yeah, so way before I became a councillor, I was obviously a market gardener, and the one plan came in and hit the dairy boys pretty hard in our region. And then all of a sudden, the vegetable growers were drawn into it. Now, the way it was set up was a very much a pastoral system system, so we couldn't apply to it as vegetable farmers, and we found ourselves not being able to be consented. So there's over about 60 of us who are unconsented in this region for a pretty important activity in terms of food production for the country. So we've been lobbying Horizons for probably 6 odd plus years now, and very intensely as it came up to Plan Change 2. And Plan Change 2, although it revises the nitrogen leaching table, which brings in the dairy boys across in the Tararua, was nowhere near what we could do as vegetable production units. So.
Okay, so you haven't landed anywhere with the Regional Council yet, can get effectively a hall pass from a national standard. What makes Horowhenua and Pukekohe more important than other market garden regions? And I know there's a lot of market gardeners here in Canterbury that have to abide by that blanket rule of ECAN.
Yeah, so ECANS was really great. They started down the Horizons path and then backtracked and gave their growers an achievable pathway to consent by using the NZ EMS standard. So Woodhaven Gardens is the only farm so far to have had that audit and be accredited for EMS, and yet we don't meet it under Horizons because they haven't wanted to separate pastoral farming from vegetable production. And Minister Parker, rightly so, has understood the science behind vegetable growing, and that is we use more nitrogen to produce that food, but per hectare of food we are far more environmentally efficient than other forms of farming.
Okay, so it's not about the input, it's about the output you're suggesting. However, his freshwater rules are suggesting it's the flip side. He's trying to monitor input rather than effect.
Yes, but our effect, if we use the proper mitigations, and which I think our farm particularly has highlighted as completely achievable while being viable, hence winning the Regional Balance Farm Environmental Awards just recently, means that we can put mitigations in place that, although we may have high inputs, we can mitigate those outputs, the leaching of nitrate into the waterways.
I'd like to I'm still trying to wrap my head around this, sorry. Why isn't it on a case-by-case basis with the land use that is chosen by the property owner and the output in a manageable system, as opposed to ring fencing a style of food production, or picking out particular regions that get a hall pass, like producing food?
Yeah, it's certainly not.
Yeah.
It's certainly not a hall pass by any means. We still have to achieve a environmental standard. We have to have a farm environmental plan which is independently audited by a government agency. So if we aren't showing those reductions in nitrogen use, you're not going to get consented anyway because you haven't met that standard. And if all growers across the whole of New Zealand have their EMS bolt on to what they're already doing in their good agricultural practice management, we will be well and beyond where we need to be in terms of mitigating our nutrient use.
So can you just give us an understanding of what it's like for you being between a rock and a hard place, wearing a councillor's hat and being a market gardener?
Yeah, I need to say in my opinion, because that's what I was taught in the very first week of council school. So in my opinion, it's hugely frustrating. None of us are sitting here saying we want to be environmental terrorists. We are saying we want to produce food for this country. We are in one of the best regions in the whole of New Zealand to produce that food. Please allow us a pathway. And as a councillor, let's just say there's a few holes in the tongue that haven't resulted from piercings.
Oh, lovely put. Because there's so many stakeholders in that particular region, and of course everybody has their own 2 cents that they want to. Well, how far are we going to get towards some form of a solution, or does the government have to step in, do you believe, and completely reform the RMA?
I don't think the RMA needs to be reformed. I think if you refer to, and I'm just taking this off the top of my head, I think it's in Section 5 of the RMA. If we abide by that in the Plan Change 2 in the Horizons region, we'll be able to get over the line. It's about Horizons backing down a little bit and creating an alternative pathway for us, because we're not dairy farmers, we're not pastoral farmers. We need a different set of guiding principles in order for us to be consentable.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much for taking the time to explain that fully for us, because, from the outset, reading a headline, you can assume, hang on a minute, what's going on here? And it certainly was the first reaction as soon as the draft national policy statement came out. So what would you like to see in closing, Emma, and where this freshwater policy ends up?
I would really like to see the exemption. I think under, just quickly, the EMS, we've reduced our inputs and our leaching by close to 50%, which I think is amazing. If every grower in New Zealand reduces their leaching rate by 50%, you're nearly Bob's your uncle. And that exemption takes into account the high rainfall of Pukekohe and the Horowhenua region, and potentially it also secures a heck of a lot of food, affordable food, for the rest of New Zealand.
Sorry, I should say it's last. It's a habit of mine. I'm just looking down here at the comments. We're talking a lot about skill shortages. How are you getting on in your industry?
We're terrified.
Oh, God. Not another one.
Yeah. We've got a lot of RSEs who have been stuck here since September last year. I have them from Tonga, Samoa and Kiribati. We're one of the very few vegetable production units that use RSE staff, and they supplement our core local staff. And I don't know how we're going to get through the December, January, February season without some solution to this.
I don't often drink whiskey, Emma, but after tonight, I think I'm going to go and have one because, oh my goodness, it's coming every which way. I wish you all the best with your particular mission, the winter, and of course your staffing situation as well. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. It's Emma Clarke from Woodhaven Gardens near Levin, and of course she is a councillor for Manawatu-Whanganui area as well. Sorry, the reason I was... Michael Ross has said, do we need to train up locals more effectively on a major scale? Absolutely, Michael. So we're not reliant on seasonal staff from offshore. Absolutely, Michael. But that's not going to happen in a couple of months. And that's the main problem. We have been wanting to train staff in this industry for 5 to 10 years because we've seen the skill shortage coming and then you add COVID on top. So my thoughts are out there with everybody that is extremely stressed about this. Now, next up, we're going to stay with the last name and we're going to go to another Clark. His name is Neville Clark and very well known for getting around the traps every bull sale season with his fine, humorous auctioneering. What a wonderful commentator on how the bull sale season's up next on Sarah's Country. This is Sarah's Country. Well, last Friday, I had the privilege of heading out to Silverstream Charolais here near Lincoln, of course, for their annual bull sale. Great people, the fishers. And of course, what an outstanding result. 9,500 in average there and a packed rostrum. But that wasn't just the case for the Silverstream Charolais team. It was a very strong bull sale season across the country, despite COVID. So to join us to unpack his thoughts around this year's bull sale season is, of course, the very renowned auctioneer, Neville Clark from Carrfields. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us, Neville. Now, hey, you would have had a lot of fun. It would have been one of the last ones of the season last Friday, was it?
Yeah, well, certainly the last one on my run, Sarah, but the Cam Heggie and the Waikato they've still got 4 or 5 up there and up in the Northland. So, but yeah, she's pretty much down and dusted now, and it's been a really good season when you think of what we were facing. But luckily, we were able to get to sales and participate. One of the things I think we saw something new. We had Auctions Plus and Bidder, 2 different live stream influences into the sale, and they played their role. They probably didn't get as much mileage as they could have done because we were allowed to go to sales. But look, it's new technology and it'll have its place, and it'll all blend itself in eventually.
I'd like to know what your thoughts are first, whilst you just touched on that. Where do you think that online trading will find its place from what you've seen so far for genetic sales?
Oh, it'll find its place. There's nothing like looking at the animal itself. If you haven't been able to get to the sale, and view the animals, it'll be a pretty tough call to buy one over the phone. Generally you'd be buying a stud bull baby. Not so bad for commercial, but to buy a stud bull, you've got to look at everything that needs to happen with the bull, and I don't think you can quite see it on a TV screen. But look, you've got people on the ground, and you can confirm with them, and then bid away as you did. And funny enough, I did a sale at Mangahina, and we sold some semen for an amazing price, and that was both purchasers were from Perth in Australia, and away it went, and they made $5,150 a straw, so it can happen, all right.
And it makes it quite strange for you yourself, auctioneering, dealing with hybrid type scenarios, Neville.
Yeah, it is a bit strange. You've just got to be mindful that that you're not going too fast. You've got to give them time to bid. You've got to maintain your the increases fairly. So it's sort of 100, 200. It's simple like that. 300, 400. You can't sort of find the hobble length and whack it into them a bit. But that's the way it is. And as I say, we'll get better at it. And as I say, it'll have its place.
Yeah, now looking at these clearance numbers, of course, this is in Farmers Weekly's 2-page spread, which will come out on Monday. All the bull sale results is an excellent way of seeing it all. Numbers of bulls sold, average price, top price, who the buyer was, all collectively. So check it out in your Farmers Weekly on Monday. Some pretty awesome clearance rates. Is that because they took the advice to maybe pull the numbers back?
Oh, well, yeah, possibly. I think... just one of those years where there was enough bulls for the market. Some places did pull them back, but not significantly. It just goes to show that the people that got cows now are pretty die-hard cow people, and where the cows are up in the high country, you put good bulls go in, and good stuff comes out. And at the end of the day, the protein shortage around the world is going to continue to play a role in this market, and the beef market especially. And at the moment, there's a huge interest for export cattle, yearling heifers, and of all descriptions. So, look, it all looks good, and good on the fellas to get out and then buying good bulls.
Yeah, and actually looking through this list, there's a lot with the word commercial beside buyers. What did you find in terms of some of those top prices where commercial guys are now valuing genetics? Even more. I think they can see a combination between EBVs and the phenotype. So, the EBVs have been around a wee while. It is an estimated breeding value, but we've got a bit more faith in them than perhaps that we had. And I think the average farmer's getting to grips with them a little bit. I think it's about right. For a stud bull, what is a stud bull worth? It's what someone thinks it's worth and what they can get out of it genetically. And we had that wonderful price, $104,000 at Tuiroa. That was 2 studs that have a decent plan. They'll sell some semen from him, and I mean to say it's all good for the stud, good for the industry, and as I say, it was a wonderful sale for the Padrell family. And from a commercial perspective, though, I mean, some of these record prices definitely help pulling up averages, but it seems like commercial buyers across the board seem to find a bull that they were happy with. Would you say that's fair?
Very much so. I think, look at some of these sales that we do, some of these bigger sales that sell a lot of stud bulls. Carrfields Angus, we sold 13 stud bulls there with an average value of $23,000 this year. Well, if you take that amount of money off the total, the commercial bulls there very viable, for the quality you get. And I think, you've got to look at that. You think of some of these studs, they do sell some high price stud bulls, and it makes the commercial bulls very viable. And I think this year, more so than ever, a lot of really good bulls were sold between sort of $8,000 to $11,000. And if you look at the total quality of them, they were really, really good buying. Like they're, strong, capable cattle, and I think there's some, the best shopping's done in that range, I think.
Now, was there any variance majorly between breeds this year, or was it pretty similar?
Oh, I think it was pretty similar, really. They've, I think the Angus, of course, is 42% of the national herd is the Angus base. So, we sell a lot of Angus bulls, the Hereford and next in line, and they had some wonderful sales. And the blue blood Hereford fella, you're not going to change him because he loves the cattle and loves the breed, and they do the job in the right place. And then you go to exotics. They'd probably just battled a bit off the back of the Angus strength, but look, at the end of the day, it's a preference, and those exotic cattle throw a little bit more growth into it, and they're probably better value for money if you look on a per calf basis, but each to his own. Well,
absolutely right. No, I'm actually looking at the averages of the exotics there around that sort of 5 to 6 mark. But then, golly gosh, Mangahina, 17 out of 17 with an average of 11,735 for speckled parks. I think that's the new hot ticket.
Yeah, it is, and I've been involved in that sale for the last 3 years with speckled parks, and look, they're a new breed on the block, and there's a lot of good about them. I say they're new, so a lot of people are still trying them, but gee, when you look at the bulls themselves, they're high-yielding, really attractive cattle, and Mark McKenzie at Mangahina certainly stole the march there. He got into the job early and leads the field. And I say, when you can sell semen to Perth, Australia, for $5,000+ a store, you know that something's going right. So, as I say, this is a new breed, and we'll see a few more in the sale yards, and who knows, a few more people might be into them.
Oh, excellent. Hey, thank you so much, Clarkie. Now, just to end, I'm hearing that some rough weather across the North Island. How's things? Are you sort of putting your feet up now that you've done your season?
Oh, no, not really. No, commercial work just takes over now, so back into it. Although we've got very wet here on the East Coast, and the last 3 weeks we've had probably between 10 and 15 inches of rain. So winter has set in a little bit. But we were really dry, and the February, March, April for us here on the coast was getting a bit dire. But I say we're making a comeback now, and it could stop any day it likes. But further south of us, Hawke's Bay haven't had the rain, and they still need a fair bit to get the levels right. So we'll be in for a really good spring. And I say the dams are full again now. So it'll be good.
Oh, great to hear. Thank you so much. That's Clarkie there from Carrfields, of course, very well known auctioneer across New Zealand. Now, coming up after the break, we're actually going to stay in the world of stud stock and to head to Northland to catch up with Mr. Chris Biddles. But it's actually, we're not talking about cattle. We're going to talk about keeping safe and recognising the signs of stress after Chris's near-death experience on farm and the strong message he's adamant to get out there around health and safety. All that after this video from Chris from Farm Strong. And please, it is a little bit graphic, but please take on board that Chris is trying to get a very strong message out there. We'll catch up with Chris after this break.
This is Sarah's Country.
I knew I was going to have 4 months in a wheelchair, but it could have been life. I drove up the hill, and this particular ridge, there's one safe place to go down. But because the brain wasn't working, I turned back and poked my nose over, and as soon as I drove over, I knew I was no coming back from there. Went end over end and luckily catapulted me off, and then I scrambling, knowing there was a quad coming behind me, and then smack came down on top of my ankle and locked it under. I was working extremely long hours. I was so buggered. I didn't sit back and think, what could happen with this tiredness? I just kept pushing on. If I wasn't so fatigued, I wouldn't have gone down that hill. I think that's the trouble. We don't sit down and say, look, let's take 10 minutes to evaluate, where am I? You know, what's our situation? You just keep bloody head down, arse up. Sometimes half an hour over a beer or a coffee or something, and saying, is my mental state going to cause problems on the farm? For me, or for someone else, or for your animals? Please, please recognise that fatigue, but not only recognise when you're fatigued, but do something about it.
For those of you watching, holy moly, that was a gnarly accident that Chris Biddles had his experience. Now, the reason we're talking about this is because Farmstrong have released some research that has found 58% that have had farm place incidents and accidents said that stress, including exhaustion, lack of sleep, coping with the ups and downs of farming, and being too busy to take a break or connect with friends and family contributed to their most recent injury. 13,500 1,000 agricultural-related injury claims, ACCC, every year, costing around $50 million. And of course, following that quad bike accident, Northland farmer Chris Biddles has become a huge advocate for this message and joins us now from his home in Northland. Good evening, sir.
Kia ora. It's Sarah. Great to see you again.
You too. You too. We were talking about having a whiskey earlier there, and we've had a dram or two in the past, and you certainly enjoy a good yarn, hence why I'm very excited to have you on the show. But this is a very serious yarn this time. Would you be able to explain the sort of lead up to your injury?
Yeah, look, it was all. I was due to get a new knee in February 2019, and I was determined to behave myself with that new knee and have 8 weeks off farm. To do that, I had to get the farm set up for me to be 8 weeks off the farm. So we worked our ass off for 8 weeks beforehand, and we had Christmas Day off and New Year's Day off in the December, January leading into it. The day of the accident, Daphne, our long-term worker, was down walking the root burn track. So Karen and I, we were at the yards, and we were really making progress on getting ahead. I went out to shift some cattle, and there's a ridge that I had to go along, and there's one place to go down that ridge which is safe. And when I went up onto the ridge and the dogs saw the cattle that I was going to shift, they jumped off the quad. And I looked back and I thought, oh, shit, can I go over here? And it was just a dumbass decision, because I'd gone past, heading to the safe place, turned back, went down. As soon as I put my nose over, I knew I was stuffed. And, so I went... It went end over end, the quad literally went end, but I was just so lucky because it chucked me out, it catapulted me out a fair way. And when I landed on the ground, I knew there was a quad coming behind me, and I was scrambling out of the way, and then went thump down on my bloody ankle. So, and my ankle stuck underneath. I gave it an almighty big yank, and it came out, thankfully, and I took my boot off, and I could see things were a bit shitty. I dragged myself up, I thought if I can turn the quad over, I can get some help, and grabbed the quad to pull myself up, and that's when I discovered I'd broken my shoulder in half because it was agony. But I couldn't do anything. I crawled, I had to go about 35 metres up a hill because I had no radio service or cell phone service there. And got halfway up the hill, I looked around, and the bloody radio was down at the quad, so I had to drag myself back down again to get the radio. And this was one arm, one leg, pushing. Took me about half an hour, I guess, to get up the hill. And I called a mayday on the radio. My daughter and son-in-law heard it. I was so lucky that there was a fluke that they heard it, actually. And Karen was heading to town after working in the yards. So I remember Joanne, my daughter, said, I said, come and get me from Rush Paddock and get an ambulance to Pinaki Road. And she rang 111. Charles came to get me, and the 111 people said, what's the nature of the patient's injuries? And she said, I have absolutely no idea. But if he called for an ambulance, it must be really bad, and you won't get to where he is. So they dispatched a helicopter. It was so lucky. Anyway, that was, and it was all because I was so tired from 8 weeks' work getting ready for that knee operation. I just made a dumbass decision.
Oh, and so lucky and fortunate as well that, of course, you were able to get there in such a short amount of time to your local GP. I mean, to be able to stitch you all back together, Chris.
Well, actually, not local GP, but when Joanne said that they couldn't get to me, they dispatched the helicopter straight away as well, and the ambulance helicopter both turned up by that time they'd got me back to Joanne and Charles' house. And so I was in base hospital, Whangarei Base Hospital, about 3:30, and I got this amazing surgeon. They told me, they actually said, you might have had a shit day, but it's all just got a bit better for you because you've got this amazing surgeon. And this surgeon from Whangarei Base Hospital, Margie Pole, over 3 operations, she's put it all back together, and just amazing, our system. I could not fault the health system in New Zealand.
Hey, now, in all of your years of farming, Chris, you've been pretty unscathed, but you've also probably been fatigued a lot in the past. You know, I mean, how are you starting to now connect the dots around how we need to pay more attention to this?
Yeah, well, I'll do that. Interesting enough, not been too much unscathed, because 32 years before, in exactly the same paddock 500 metres away, I broke my tib and fib on a two-wheeler and had to get home myself, no radios or anything. Yeah, so no, I haven't actually been unscathed. But no, look, this one was all about fatigue, because I wouldn't have made the decision to go down that hill if I wasn't fatigued. About 10 years ago, I had a presentation from a ACC contractor in, it was actually in an Angus tour in Invercargill or Southland, and this guy had done wonderful research. And the biggest message that he gave us was that at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you'll make a decision on your quad that you would not make at 8 o'clock in the morning. And I've worked with that for 9 years. I'd stop. I would stop mowing a paddock at 6 o'clock at night. I'd be going up a hill. I'd stop at the bottom of the hill now. Think, would I go up here at 8 o'clock in the morning? And I've done that, and thought, yes, I would or I wouldn't. This time I was so fatigued, I was incapable of making sound decisions. It was, it was such a dumbass decision, and it was all about fatigue.
What would you have done different? What would you have done differently, actually, in reflection to that? I mean, you had a deadline, like every farmer, that you rush to get away, and then you rush when you get home. How do we actually plan when it's such a hard thing to do with so many elements thrown at you in farming?
Look, what I do differently now, and this is what I'm trying to tell farmers, is to sit down with a beer or a cup of coffee and talk to your staff, talk to your wife, whatever, and say, I know I'm buggered, I know I'm stuffed. What are the potential consequences? Because I actually sat with a mate a couple of days before, and I actually was getting kermas for our pigs so that Karen didn't have to do works when I was in hospital and extra stuff. And I sat with him and I said, I am so stuffed. I said, I have never been so stuffed in all my life. And I didn't realise what the consequences of that statement were. Now, our team meetings with staff, we've got an extra staff member now, and we talk about our mental situation. During the drought, we've just had a shit drought. We've talked about it. Is it affecting you, and will it affect your decisions? Are you in danger because you're worried about the cattle being hungry and all that sort of stuff? So we actually talk about it, and we've just cut the hours down. We don't do the 12-hour days except for when it's really, really exceptional, and we don't start a new job at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We used to do that. In the summer, you'd start a new job at 4 o'clock and finish at 7.
And you've been up since God knows what. Chris, I'm just thinking about, what's driving a lot of these massive hours is, of course, the drive for cash flow to appease banks and the high stocking rates to achieve that as well. Especially, the stats here that just over half of the farmers No, there it is. 500 injured farmers that were researched in this research from ACC under the age of 35. 35% of them are more likely to report aspects of stress, and 30% of them are a major contributor to injury. Is there just a lot to, the dynamics changed around farming with the level of stress and the level of pressure to get everything done now? And what advice for that younger group would you give?
Look, it's actually been around for a long time. I started farming in the 80s, no ownership in the 80s, started farming in the 70s, and we struck the Rogernomics and whatever, and I don't disagree, Rogernomics was the right thing in the end, but it was a 4-2 between the eyes for farmers. So, we went through that period, and our generation, I think, are used to just getting on and just working hard and do too many hours. Hopefully the next generation are a little bit more sensible with their own hours and their own well-being. But I think certainly there's a lot of stress now with all the water, clean water and climate change and everything else. And I don't want to say what my beliefs are, but that added stress. So farmers need to be really careful, but just sit down over a cup of coffee or a beer and just say, am I giving enough time to myself?
What about personal accountability and responsibility over your own sort of mental and physical well-being as well, Chris? It's one thing to tell people that you're buggered, but it's up to you to do something about it, right?
That's exactly the thing that I knew I was, but I didn't. And you've got to just sit. I think you've just got to sit down, have the time out and say, okay, I'm really stuffed. Carving, we're in carving now, and we're stuffed. What is the potential consequences of where I am? That's what we don't recognise. Farmers we just tend to keep going. We're bulletproof. It's a little bit. It's like quad. Everyone says quads are dangerous. I disagree. Quads are not dangerous. But the decisions we make on those quads are dangerous, can be dangerous. And that's a big distinction, those decisions. And so why do we make stupid decisions? In my case, fatigue. And I knew I was fatigued. I didn't sit down and think of the possible consequences. I do now. I really do. And I just want farmers to... farmers need to kick their own asses, and they really do, and say, shit, we're not invincible. We're actually vulnerable, and do something about it. Sit down, and just take a break and say, what's my mental status? Has it got potential? Not only for me, I'm sure you don't look after your animals as well if you're absolutely buggered and stressed. And if you're a boss, you sure as hell won't be looking after your staff properly.
What an absolutely amazing way to end the interview, as well as, of course, the show. Chris, you're a superstar, and I can see you being a pin-up boy for this. Did you see how I used the word boy?
I like the boy, yeah. I like the boy, yeah.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure to see you alive, kicking, and very well, Chris, following that. And thank you so much for being an advocate for work, this, health and safety, and, of course, fatigue on farm, especially going into an extremely crazy time with calving and lambing coming up. That's Chris Biddle, Northland farmer, of course, Te Atarangi Angus, and make sure you check out, if you want, in the market for some fine Angus yearlings this spring. Just a wee plug for Chris there. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen and watch the end of Ceres Country tonight. That ends us for the week. We'll be back, of course, on Monday. And if you'd like, new to Ceres Country, and you'd like to divulge into the library of fantastic interviews, make sure you head to Ceres Country on podcast, or of course check us out at Farmers Weekly on YouTube. All of the interviews individually broken down there, and of course farmersweekly.co.nz for all of your daily rural news, and of course in your mailbox on Monday as well. That's all we have time for tonight and this week. I look forward to seeing you again soon, and on the message of tonight, please this weekend stay safe wherever you are, and if someone around you is getting buggered, remind them of the consequences of being buggered as opposed to what got them there. So it is very important to say, of course, good night and go well.
This is Ceres Country.